So I've opened my Sharingan and I legit think Adri is an A or potentially an S tier character. Normally the way things go is if you're maining a character, you think they're bad because if I'm playing a good character and I'm not climbing, I have to admit to myself, I'm probably just an average player. But I'm here to take the blow to my ego and admit I think Adri's really good right now, and here is my Season 4 guide. So why do I think she's so good? Right now, the second rated player in KR, probably soon to be the first, has been grinding Adriana, and I just fucking love how he's doing it. He currently has a 40% win rate on her and averages 3.4 kills a game. So you might be wondering what has changed since the last time I did like an Adriana video that has changed my opinion so much. One, I think she got a big buff from Augments. Frailty just feels super good on her, and along with the supporting Augments, like I think she can secure objectives pretty well. Outside of that, really Adri's just received nerf after nerf, but there's too much in her kit that keeps her relevant. If you're looking for a guide that just reads you abilities, you can go check my first video out, but this is going to be a little more of a step up from that. So yeah, buckle up. So to start this guide off, I want to talk about how to take fights. You always lead with your autos. Honestly, a majority of your damage comes from your autos, but it's not very intuitive looking at the character's kit. You see all these spells and you're like, well, I gotta hit my skill shots, so definitely most of my damage is coming from my abilities. Autos are really important at the start of a fight because it helps you proc Frailty. You need 3 autos or skills to land to proc it, so I usually lead with an auto or 2, and then you can drop R and Q them for a huge burst of damage. It does so much damage because Frailty enables a bunch of true damage. Alternatively, you could also auto twice, poke with Q, and that does a ton of damage as well without having to commit an alt charge. One thing that's really important to note is you don't want to fight when you don't have many of your cooldowns for alt charges or W's up, because oil slicks and alt charges are how you peel people off of you. If a melee gets on top of you and you don't really have anything, then you pretty much just die. So that spacing is super important. That's why I'd suggest, if you're autoing, to make sure you're A clicking. This is pretty much where you click A as you're like clicking your auto, so it auto targets them. If you're just clicking on the character themselves, then there's a chance you miss and walk forward towards them, and this gap close that you're doing for them is a huge disadvantage you're putting yourself at, because you want to play the spacing as much as you can. You want to use your range to your advantage. I'd also like to point out that you don't always have to set your oil slick on fire. Yes, you do proc your passive, but also if you don't set it on fire, it keeps the grounded effect. So you have the option to just throw your oil slick out to kite people if they're running at you and it's going to take forever for them to catch up. Or you can use it to just pepper them with autos, right? Another W interaction is you used to be able to check bushes with your Ws. You can't really do that anymore. They patched it out, so what you can do is you can throw a W in the bush and then just barely touch it with your flamethrower. It'll light on fire, and then that checks the bush for you. It doesn't quite have the same vision range as before, so if someone's sitting on like the edge of the bush, you might not catch them, but for the most part, I've noticed it gets the trick done. So oil slicks are something really important to understand, and you actually limit their options when you throw them down. It's tough to explain, so I'm going to go into MS Paint for this part of the lesson. All right, I'm going to talk about the W oil slicks just for a little bit here. So the most common one is Luke is right here, you're right here. You're going to put it right in front of you guys, right? So more than likely, he's not going to run straight at you, or else he's a dumbass and you're just going to hit Q and there goes his health bar. He has 2 options. He can either go around to the left, go around to the right. What I try to do here is, while he's closing the gap, I try to predict where he's going to go, and you know there's 2 options, and you drag your flamethrower with them, right? And ideally, if he goes around this side, then I'm dragging my flamethrower around this side. So he is going to have to eat this, or you just use that as a barrier. Obviously, he could hit a skill shot through that, but we're thinking of more of they're just like running up to you. And now, let's say we add a third party into the game. We're kind of duking it out, we're fighting. What is one thing that I like to do, like a lot, when a third party shows up, is say we're both half health, I like to throw an oil slick right here, so it kind of forces them to fight, right? You can even light it on fire and they're less likely to walk through, because if she walks through this, she's probably going to get chunked for quite a bit. Okay, so that was cool. As always though, hold your E, that is your huge escape. The more matchups you play, the more you'll know who can cancel your E. If you get your E canceled, it's like 9 out of 10 times you're just gonna die. Then the last thing I'd like to talk about when fighting is your D skill, and I genuinely believe D skill use separates a good Adri from like a great Adri. I've noticed really good players use it more offensively, so they get like a lot of early damage off because of this, and it really shifts momentum in a fight. Personally, I use it a lot more defensively, just because maybe I'm not that great of a player, but my reaction time seems to be lesser, and I drop it on me to kind of peel or to get some disengage going. Alright, so let us talk augments. So I think frailty is the biggest staple that you're going to run into. I wouldn't take anything else. The like sub augments, quench, I think is a must have at this point. I didn't take it at first because I was like, well, Adri's clear is already good, I don't really need the help, but this helps so much with taking objectives, and I think that's going to be something I stress throughout the video, that objectives are more important on Adri now than maybe ever. Along with that augment or sub-augment, you could take Spirit Calling, which is going to get you some SP back, or you could take Goliath. I think Goliath definitely depends on how much HP is in your build. The build I'm going to show you guys today is definitely more HP reliant, so I typically go Calling with it. Then the secondary augment I take is the support tree. You get 2, right? So Thorn Shackles is a must. Immobilizing a target causes them to take increased damage. That is huge on Adriana. The second one is a lot more up in the air. If you're a new player, I'd go Logistics, but if you're more adept to making food, definitely it's either Assembly or it's Thea. So Thea, whatever it's called, is what I've been running recently, because it increases your vision range at night, which is huge. Normally, I didn't take that like off rip because I already had Moto Helm, which gave me vision increase, but nowadays I am upgrading to Myth Helm so early in the game that I think I get more bang for my buck with Thea than I do Assembly. With that being said, this is just for solos. I think Assembly is still really good in squads. And also it still does feel nice in solos when you like are peeling someone off you and you use an ult charge and you get a little burst of shield. Alright, let me talk about builds for a second, and I think this is like kind of the most exciting part and the part that people look forward to the most. But traditionally, I've always run my classic Avenue to Beach to Uptown to Factory build, and you can get that online even before nighttime falls. It's a super quick build. I think it feels really good, and you can grief people at Factory who are rolling in. If you want to know how I kind of run that build and how I see that build, I have a video on that as well. But I've been kind of converted because I don't like the itemization of Sheath nearly as much as I do Plasma Arc. The extra attack speed feels super good, especially now that I've incorporated a lot more autos into my play when playing Adriana. So at the beginning of Season 4, Slim13 drops a few builds that he was very excited about in the character Discord. I'd check out the character Discord if you haven't, I'll leave a link in the description. But in these builds, I noticed he is super hype about itemizing Plasma Arc, which I understand why now. The only issue is the build that I liked of his always ended Beach, and it felt like I was always kind of scrambling around fighting people not quite full build yet, and I didn't love this playstyle. So since I couldn't scrap with the best of them super early game, I decided to peep another route that's been popular for a while, which goes Forest, into Uptown, into Chapel, into Dock. And the issue with this build is I didn't love the itemization. I liked it, but I didn't love it, and you get like super weird in Chapel where you have to juggle a lot of things, and you don't really get a huge opportunity to prep stuff, which I enjoy doing. So then rolls around the best player in Korea, or one of the best players playing Adri, and he is running that build I just talked about. Except he builds Schrodinger's box instead of Music Box, which I think is a huge upgrade. Music Box is nice because it gives that extra attack speed, but all of that extra HP for Schrodinger's like had me sold. I love Schrodinger's, that's my favorite accessory in slot. Just feeling a little more tanky definitely helps on Adri. Okay, so how this build works is you're gonna start forest, you just have to grab a couple of items, but here I'll eat my bread and I'll actually pick up a herb and a flower and make orchids. This is the first part of like my food prep. At this point, I'll go into Uptown, and you're pretty much the first one into Uptown. A lot of people route into Uptown, but it's nice getting there before everyone else can, before it's like pick through, right? So you grab everything you need there, and you either TP over to Chapel, which I do most of the time based on where I am in the loot distribution, or you can walk up there. When you get up to Chapel, this is where things get crazy. You start having to juggle items. So in Chapel, you want to target things that you're going to be able to clear up inventory space with, right? If you start building that chest piece, that's going to clear up a slot. If you pick up chalk and then you also have the helmet, then you can just go for rocks right away, and that's going to clear up some of the space in your inventory. Really, you just have to run it to know what you have to do when you get some items before others. I know that sounds very vague, but for example, a lot of the times you have to ditch your baseball. It's really easy to prep autographed baseball for Dyadic up in Uptown as you're routing through, but sometimes you just kind of have to ditch it and move on. And then you route towards Dock. Dock can either be hit or miss on whether it's picked through or not. I usually route towards Console because I want to get vision as soon as possible, because there's scary people, Doc. Like, you could get a Daniel there that wants to end you, maybe a Fiora or Jan, like, who knows. So you want to be pretty on the safe side, but also by the console, there's a lot of boxes anyways, so I don't think it's like going out of your way. Plus, now when you get console, you can see what items are in the area, which is pretty useful. All right, so in Dock, we're gonna get a little crazy. After your full build in Dock, there's a few things you want to do. One, we're gonna prep a sticky bomb, which is kind of crazy, but hear me out. What you're gonna want to do when you get your sticky bomb is you can, one, lead off with it, hit them with it, get the slow effect, and then you're gonna be able to hit your Q a lot easier, hit an R a lot easier. It's just super great to start poking with. They also made a change where swapping throw weapons is a lot easier. You don't have to wait for the throw to actually hit. So you can swap between smoke bomb and sticky bomb super easily to get that like passive ability on the smoke bomb first hit. So you do start prepping sticky bomb here. You also get the bears, because hear me out, we're gonna get crazy. You want to contest alpha. You always want to contest alpha. If you don't get the bears, you might show up like 5 or 6 mastery rather than 7 or 8. I'd also like to mention, for food prep, those orchids, you could potentially upgrade those to like the potions in Chapel. But if you missed glass bottles in Chapel, you could also bring them down to Dock and do the exact same thing. I used to be like, well, like if I get mithril, that's pretty hype. Like I can make a myth helm, but really, I've learned every game this man on KR is playing, he gets Myth Helm. It's so important. It has cooldown reduction, which obviously is a great stat on Adriana. You can spam your abilities more, but it also has a lot of defense, but mainly it has a lot of attack speed, which I think is huge. So I used to feel really strong with Adri at the start of the game once I finished my full build, but then mid-game, I'd kind of start having some issues where I felt like people were just spiking ahead of me. And that's why getting Myth Helm is so important. I think it keeps you in a good place where people aren't really passing you. After you get Myth Helm, this is where I usually go around and I finish prepping my sticky bomb. I like to go archery a lot for this because one, you probably already have your battery stuff from Doc, and you can grab the gunpowder that you'll need, you can grab the balls that you need, and you can go ahead and prep your Queen of Hearts as well, because you can get the cloth down at Doc, and then you can come up and get the monk's robe up in archery. And archery and temple tend to close, so by the time you get to Wick, those zones might not even be open to prep Queen of Hearts after you have the VF blood. So you have your Myth Helm and you're in a good spot. You're switching your sticky bomb and maybe your dyadic, maybe your smoke bomb. It depends on what upgrades you have at this point in the game. You can contest Force Core for Omega pretty much every time. Getting an auto arms would be super nice for Wick and contesting that. But one thing I've noticed is that this Adriana player that I'm pointing out that wins 40% of his games, every game he wins, he has Wick. So it's very important. We've always said it's very important. And every time he gets Wick, he gets to transition to Queen of Hearts because he did that prep beforehand. I think a lot of Adri players get that VF blood, then they're like, well, what can I do? Queen of Hearts, that's not quite in zone. Maybe I can do like a Burgundy, or maybe I can do a, I don't know, a gun buy. Like it's you gotta go for Queen of Hearts. It's just best in slot by far, and the cooldown reduction cap being increased, and then also the defense that it gives you just gives you a lot more survivability. Like, let's be real, the Wick buff already gives Adri so much damage that it's not really all that big of a deal that you might be losing a little damage by going Queen of Hearts. So you might be asking, well, how does it get Wick every game? You can be a little crazy with it. There's ways where you can just kite Wick with your flamethrower, just with your Q, and then maybe throw a few autos at it. When it turns around, walk in its goo, do the same thing. And then if no one's contesting, you can just all in it. If people are contesting, you can just disengage and then go back. It's really hard for Adri to like last hit the Wick if there's a lot of people around it. So something I do encourage is keeping your timer like super fresh for when Wick does roll around, because at this point in the game you can tank a ton of red zone timer and be okay. So some of the sideways transitions you can do is Plasma Arc I'd keep. I don't think there's a better sideways transition, but for your chest piece, I'd say EOD is probably a little bit better than Butler's suit. The only thing is like EOD's routing gets really weird, so that's why you're not building it on this route. I like to swap out Motorcycle Helm for Diadem if I get the chance. People do it for Tac Ops Helmet also, same with Imperial Crown, but ideally you do have that Myth Helm. Mavericks Runner I usually keep. If you really think you need more attack speed, you could really try Feather Boots. With cooldown reduction, you could even fuck around with Tachyon Brace, but again, this is assuming that you're going for like Myth Helm. And then Schrodinger's, I don't swap this out with anything. Even like Myth Quiver, where I used to, because that extra attack range felt really good, I don't really do it anymore. So I made a fun little tier list for the transition items, mainly for this routing that I'm doing and this like game plan of contesting all the objectives. So obviously I'm gonna have Queen of Hearts at the top, gives you everything you want. In Adriana, you really want cooldown reduction, attack speed, attack power. Yeah, love this item, Slay Queen. Myth Helm, huge power spike, super early. Also gonna go in S tier. I try to get this every game. I used to take it for granted, now I do not. A tier, I really like most of the boots on Adri, and because they don't conflict with anything in S tier, then I throw them up here. I see the KR player that I've been referencing going Hermes a lot. I think that movement speed is probably pretty helpful. I personally go Tappers a ton just because it's easy to make those from the med kit that I get from Wiccaline. Red shoes I hardly ever get because I'm using VF for Queen of Hearts, but they're pretty good. They're pretty damn good. And then glacials, I'll pick these up if I get these like early game. You can pick them up off a lot of people you kill because a lot of people rush glacials in the early game. Also, Dyadic and Auto Arms, I think these are two of the best Force Core upgrades. You don't even have to go dyadic every time. Since I'm switching between Smoke Bomb and Sticky Bomb, I don't really lose too many Smoke Bomb charges, especially when farming. So dyadic isn't necessary. I do like to upgrade to dyadic, but Auto Arms is also a very good option. Next up is the B tier, where you got Prominence. This is only in B tier because usually I'm going Queen of Hearts way before Prominence. Prominence is harder to prep, and I think Auto Arms and even Plasma Arc are really good arm slots anyways, while Queen of Hearts is definitely by far the best chest slot. The Halo got a huge buff. When I say huge, it was only 5 damage, but it didn't need a buff, if I'm going to be honest. But I don't really build it with my Force Core too much because I do have that Myth Helm. I'd rather go for something like Auto Arm or Dyadic. Kind of the same thing with Myth Chest. I think it's okay. VF Blood Chest, I meant Burgundy. The VF, like, you don't really use that for Burgundy ever. You're gonna use Queen of Hearts. Low-key, I'd use it over the shoes for Burgundy. But yeah, like, these chest pieces never really get built, but I think they're good. Like, if you like get one and you don't have Queen of Hearts, like, I'd equip it. And that's pretty much with everything on here. If it's just over a regular item in your build, you're probably gonna want to equip it. I'm not putting any items in here you wouldn't want to take, like earlier in the game, right? So the tablet I used to think was really, really good. Now I don't think I ever build it anymore. I'd rather have something like Hermes, Auto Arms, or Dyadic. It feels pretty bad losing that extra health from Schrodinger's and becoming more squishy to do more attack damage. I think it's fine though. Like, half the games I'll pick it up over Schrodinger's, but still gets a little weird. And same kind of goes with Gunbuy. Gunbuy makes you go vroom. I wouldn't build it over anything else, but I'd pick it up if I found it. Myth Shoes and Myth Shield, I don't build these just because Helm is so good, but they're fine. If you find them, I'd equip them. And then D tier, these are like situational equips. Like, if you already have a lot of health from like Taproots or something, like, you could equip Quiver or even Kundala, and that would feel pretty good. I never go out of my way to build these though. Thanks for sitting through 20 minutes of me talking about Adriana. Hopefully you picked something out of this that was at least somewhat informative or somewhat helpful. I'd appreciate it if you subscribed here, you subscribe to my Twitch or follow. Either would be great. And thank you guys for watching. It really means a lot. I know videos like this are probably more on the long-winded side and are really just gonna help the core community, but I like making them. It's more of a passion project rather than like going for views. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.